Hello and welcome to Media Snack live from New York.
And live from London.
Good. So on this very boiling hot day, everybody's been complaining about the weather in the UK, certainly. In America, it's also was beautiful weather, but we have air conditioning, by the way. That's a good tip for those of you in Europe. So we don't moan about it. Today, we're talking about procurement. So if you've joined us and you have an interest in procurement or you're in procurement, there's been lots of discussion as we've been promoting and previewing this episode from the procurement community, which is really good. Thank you for all of your comments and questions so far. So this is Media Snack. We do a weekly show where we bring you alternative perspectives on some of the big media trends and issues globally. The role of procurement in media is an interesting one, which we followed for the last 10 years. Can be quite controversial, and there's divided opinion on that. So we're going to kind of talk through some of those things. The traditional role, or the accusation often made at procurement, is that their job is to cut cost. And maybe at the beginning of the last decade, in the middle of a global recession, maybe that was something that happened. But our hypothesis today, and this is what we're going to discuss, and we're joined by two special guests who really know about this stuff, is has the role of procurement evolved, particularly in marketing, and what role procurement now plays as a good collaborator for marketing. So that's what we're going to talk about. Our special guests this week, we're delighted to be joined by two guests this week, which has made an interesting technical challenge for our editing, live editing. The first I'm delighted to introduce is Kevin McCollum, who is the manager of Indirect Sourcing at the wonderful Hershey Company. And our second guest, alongside Kevin, who knows a lot about procurement, is Laura Forcetti, who leads the global sourcing group at the WFA, which is the World Federation of Advertisers. So I think we have you both in the green room. Hi, Kevin. Hello, Laura.
Welcome.
Hello there.
Hi.
So Laura's in sweltering London, and Kevin is somewhere near Hershey in gorgeous Pennsylvania. Kevin, you have the air conditioning on, I'm assuming.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, in good fine fettle. So as usual, David and I are going to be talking through some of the kind of issues and agenda on around procurement, and then we're going to come swiftly on to meet our discuss further with our special guests.
Yes.
No. Okay. So let's quickly talk about the role of procurement in marketing. What is going on?
Yes. Okay, Tom. So procurement, I mean, we have spoken a lot about procurement in the past, many media snacks. We are also huge advocates of the procurement discipline within marketing. And we personally know lots of very, very sophisticated procurement leaders that are brilliant practitioners when it comes to media. Okay. But in this pandemic, in this moment of absolute crisis within the industry, what is a consequence is that many brands, almost without exception, are re-looking at their cost base. Okay, they're having to recalibrate the way that they invest in media, and not only this year in order to navigate themselves through what will be very choppy waters over the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months, but also in the foresight of rebudgeting for 2021. Now, that role, and we've noticed that with a number of brands that we're working with, is now beginning to be given over to the procurement leaders, right? Because that's their job. Their job is to have governance and oversight over media investment, to make sure that they collaborate clearly with the marketing teams, but to make sure that they are absolutely buttoned down when it comes to media fees, media costs, and the way the media is deployed. Now, that's an enormous challenge. It's an enormous challenge, but it's also an enormous opportunity. The last time that we had a big global recession was in 2007, 2008, 2009. Okay, and we noticed that because that was one of the reasons actually that we went out and launched ID Comms, was because we noticed that the many big brands were handing over responsibility for media to procurement leaders. Yeah. That was one of the insights that we had. Now, at the time, you could argue that procurement went in with the big hammer and went into their agencies and began to look at cost savings. They squeezed their agencies on fees. They were looking to extract greater savings from their media investments in order to protect their businesses. Now that became cyclical. It became an addiction in the marketplace. And we find ourselves now where media is highly commoditized, where some agency practices have had to align themselves in order to extract their own income from the supply chain, because their fees negotiated by procurement at the time was so kind of low. Now, as we go into this kind of crisis now, the challenge is, how is procurement going to manage this scenario, right? How has procurement in many cases evolved and become sophisticated enough to manage costs, because that is their job, but to see media as an investment? And I know the agencies are hoping that we're going to get that type of procurement leader having these conversations, rather than perhaps some of the procurement leaders 10 or 12 years ago. So that's the challenge that we've got at the moment. Really, really big opportunity for procurement leaders to step up and lead their organizations through this crisis.
Yeah, I think that's it. And I mean, that's the nub of it, right? I mean, that's the big question that hopefully we'll get some insight as well from Kevin and Laura, who we think as well, represent definitely the evolution of the role of procurement.
Yes.
as it relates to media. And it's something that we've observed and to be very positive in many places.
Absolutely.
It's good, but we can do better, as always. That's always our message on Media Snap. We can all do better, all of these kind of things. Let's just think about some of the implications then of that shift. Okay, so we seem to have lost our theme music this week, but that's okay. So the one of the big implications right now, this is certainly what we're observing in the many advertisers that we work with, and we can see more up close, is the rising influence and credibility of procurement in marketing.
Yeah.
Okay? Because of that good governance practice, because of the kind of financial rigor, because of the clear scoping, all just good behaviors, which actually, procurement can be an incredibly positive influence on the marketers, by making them better at their jobs, by just getting them kind of disciplined in what they need, what services they need, what partners they need, what they should be paying for that kind of stuff. And we've said it's been actually a joy to watch. So despite the chaos of this year and the challenges commercially for many businesses, really good positive is we've seen really good partnerships being formed between marketing and procurement, or they're blooming because of the strength of that relationship that existed already. So that's the first big, very positive implication. The other thing is, the other implication is for marketing and procurement, where you have got that good relationship, you've got to stay aligned. You possibly in marketing, you're going to have to work maybe to stick together, because there will be tensions in the business that may be pulling you apart, right? There may be pressures, obviously, on the marketer to grow at a time when the sales environment or the marketing environment is challenged, and the marketer may have an opinion on what they should be doing during a pandemic or a global recession. And there may be pressures on procurement to be moving in different directions, as you say. We saw it in the last big global recession 10, 12 years ago, this divergence between marketers and procurement. And that's led us through this decade of, certainly agencies, but also the ongoing supply chain, feeling like they have two clients. They have the marketer who talks about growth and objectives, and the procurement client who talks about, savings and discounts and negotiations. Those you've got to stick together. And so it may be a fight internally that you have to do to convince the business that marketers and their procurement colleagues, when it comes to marketing spend, have to stick together. And use the opportunity. We've got a couple of clients that are re-looking at their category strategy for media now. Lots of businesses are reevaluating their long-term strategy. Maybe it's a good time. It'd be interesting to see what Kevin and Laura think and what other businesses are doing to look at category strategy, particularly for media at the moment, so that the two of you can kind of stay aligned.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we actually talk to real marketers, Nate, give me your view. What should marketers be doing?
Well, thanks, Tom. I'm hoping that the real marketers will endorse what I'm about to say, or maybe not. Who knows, right? I mean, but the first thing I think, and you touched on it when you just kind of did the implications piece, is about changing the narrative. 12 years ago, it was about finding savings, reducing costs. That was the prevailing narrative, I think, within organizations. And that was a mandate that had come down from the CPO or the chief financial officer. We are now at a point where media's role in delivering business outcomes has never been more assured. Okay, and that's the rallying cry that needs to continue, even in this kind of crisis. So rather than talking about discounts and savings, let's reframe the argument and the discussion and the internal debate around value and growth. And you know, procurement leaders are so sophisticated now in their understanding of how media can lead a business outcome that narrative should just be permeating anyway. But focus on the narrative. That's the first thing. The second thing is preparing a business case. You know, protecting. You know, procurement leaders have to protect media investments. I believe that that's one of their goals. They have to work in collaboration with their marketing and media leaders because their job is to protect that investment going forward, not reduce it, but protect it. And so creating a business case that is compelling and simple in its language so that the C-suite understand the value of media rather than simply the price of it is kind of critical. So, you know, business case narrative is also important. And you know, and this is what I want to pick up with when I speak to Kevin, is that sense of collaboration between, you know, when it works really well, it is kind of seamless, and they are a formidable force. Marketeers with procurement leaders that are speaking the same language, but coming at that narrative from different disciplines is a formidable force internally. So that would be kind of my recommendation. Let's see what Laura and Kevin say shortly.
Good. Well, we'll get to that in just a second. Before we do, we're going to take a very quick break. Before we do that, I would say, if you're following us live, I can see there's a whole bunch of people watching live. If you leave comments, if you're watching on YouTube, add a comment down below. Please, if you have a thought on this or you want to ask questions to our guests, we'll get to, please do that. We can see that right here. We'll come up live. We can bring the questions right into the show. We'll give you a shout out. Just say hi. That's it. But we'll take a quick break, and afterwards we'll meet with our guests. Okay, we'll just meet with our guests. That's why don't we just
let's just go there. Let's ignore the break. Let's talk to our marketeers.
Welcome to live TV. So I'll introduce you just right up front, and then we need to stop talking and listen to you guys. But Kevin, you're from Hershey Company, from the procurement role, and we've known you for a few years. And as I've said to you in the past, I was really impressed when I first met Kevin, because I thought, wow, Kevin's really taken the time to understand media, you know, which we don't see a lot. So, and that was good, and we've enjoyed spending time with you. And Laura, you run the sourcing forum at WFA. Maybe if I start with you, and then David's going to start interrogating you with questions. But maybe start with just explaining the role of the WFA first, for those that maybe don't know, and also what you do as a sourcing forum. What's the purpose of that?
Sure. Thank you so much. And first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be with you guys and to bring a bit of gender balance on our panel. So it's cool. The WFA, World Federation of Advertisers, we are a global membership organization, and we help our members deliver better marketing in general. And that means more efficient, more sustainable. It encompasses a lot of topics, and we have about 180 members, of which we have 120 multinational companies such as Hershey's and other big advertisers, but also national associations such as the ANA in the US, ISBA in the UK, also representing advertisers at local or national level. So all together, we meet and we discuss practices, and we try to find solutions to evolve and do good marketing. And my role at so we have different practices, and my role at the WFA is called, it's the sourcing forum. So it's addressing the marketing procurement leaders from each company who are members of the WFA. So that represents about 1,300 people across the globe. So that's for me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Laura. And Kevin, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in a second. But Laura, just on this, whilst we're kind of talking about the sourcing forum, have you noticed that your members recently have been working in a more collaborative way with their marketing counterparts? I mean, that was one of the big kind of consequences, the challenges that Tom and I talked about. Have you noticed that there's a direction of travel in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to apologize because I wasn't in the advertising or procurement industry 10 years ago, so I can't really compare with what happened in the last recession. But I don't think we need to go that far in time to see some degree of transformation in the ways of working. Just by having a look at before and during COVID-19, I wish I could say after COVID-19, but I'm afraid we're still in it. It'd be interesting to have the same discussion maybe in a few months. But I can see, a lot of changes. And what I've put some quotes that I extracted from recent remote WFA meetings from marketing procurement leaders themselves. So in May, someone said, "Oh, there is such a huge focus on procurement at the moment, and such a strong willingness from our internal stakeholders, as well as external partners who have drastically shifted their behaviors and want us to be involved now almost everywhere. I feel that procurement has a real say now." And then another person earlier this month said, which is quite interesting as well, "I have noticed an important shift in the marketers' interest around efficiencies so they can get more for their money." Yeah. Before COVID-19, it was mainly procurement initiating these type of conversations, sometimes not in an easy way. And now I feel, marketers are really also looking into this. So I think, Kevin, you'll tell us how you personally feel about it. But from what I've heard, I believe that there is a strong need for marketing procurement right now, and it has become more important than before in most organizations.
Absolutely, Laura. Thank you so much. And Kevin, just over to you. I mean, I know by reputation, you at Hershey's work very closely with your kind of marketing team. What is the environment that has enabled you to establish that sense of kind of clear collaboration with your kind of marketing teams?
Well, what I've personally done over the last several years, and I've got a great partner, especially on the media team with Charlie Chappell, a great business partner to work with. But there are really 7 things that I see that really help to forge a close collaboration between marketing and procurement. And this is focused for the procurement professionals. The first one is to dive deep to the extent that you can, educate yourself in media and marketing to the point where you know almost as much as the stakeholders do, and leverage resources around you, whether they be auditors, the WFA, the ANA. There's so much out there that you can leverage so that when you speak at the table, you can have street credibility and really earn that seat at the table. The second one would be to not boil the ocean. Pick up 3 or 2 that you think needs focus on, or even ask your media or marketing leaders where you think the biggest opportunities are, and focus your attention on that. Third is, how do you yourself feel about ads? Companies wouldn't spend billions of dollars on advertisements if they didn't work. Now, we may not like ads, but we need, as procurement professionals, to adopt the idea that media really is an investment in your company's growth. Fourth would be very honest and transparent. You have 3 audiences. You have procurement, you have your internal media or marketing team, and then you also have your agency environment. Yeah. So if you have a hidden agenda, it's likely going to torpedo your relationship with one of those 3. So there's a reason the golden rule is golden. Fifth one is, what are your goals? Are they only savings-based? Do you know what your media leaders' goals are? If you do, offer to be a partner to the media leadership and align those goals that drive media success. Nearly all procurement professionals have to deliver a number, but aligning your goals with the media or marketing team and focusing on tools and methods to improve media, making sure there's a clear focus on ROI, eliminating duplication of services between providers, that should be your driving focus, and savings will just naturally come along for the ride. 6 is challenging in this environment, but proximity. After the pandemic subsides, see if you can be physically in close proximity to your media and marketing organization, and don't be afraid to ask to be a part of that team and attend their regular meetings, and do that virtually while we're in the pandemic situation. And then last would be to broaden your focus. Don't always focus on savings. Spend some time working on improving the processes and the working relationship. Attend a 360 agency review meeting. Question times. Use the 5 whys methodology from the world of quality to really get at the root of the problems. And those 7 principles that guide me and how I work with media and marketing really have borne a lot of fruit in my 4.5 years at Hershey, and have led to a really close, trusting working relationship with our media marketing teams here at Hershey.
Laura, I think we've got a new white paper for the WFA in those 7 principles. That is, are you writing those down? We've got this recorded so we can share. I think that is absolutely brilliant. Kevin, can I just ask a question on that? How difficult is it to maintain those clear principles when the industry, your business perhaps is going through a moment of unprecedented crisis, and there are different, more immediate, knee-jerk reaction challenges that are coming through the business? How hard or easy is it to maintain those principles and provide that clear line of sight to where you want to go?
I think it's definitely difficult, and I have the fortunate privilege for working for a company that really hasn't suffered the way some industries have in this pandemic situation. Typically, in a downturn, people will give up more luxurious or costly indulgences, and they'll pick up a $1 candy bar at the convenience store on their way home as a way to treat themselves. So, but it's still difficult. And I think one of the things that really has resonated within my working relationships with media and marketing is to sometimes take the situation and put a different spin on it, take it out of a media or marketing context and put it into a framework that people can understand in their everyday lives. For instance, if you've got a high focus on cost and you're talking to a finance or procurement person who just wants to reduce cost. Now, before I say this, let me be clear. Sometimes the business has to do things that aren't necessarily healthy in the long run to deliver value for shareholders in the short term. So sometimes you don't have a choice, but in prioritizing, I think that a lot of the focus goes back to what I said earlier. Focus on things that provide a clear ROI. Focus on things where you could potentially eliminate duplication of effort. And that's in between agencies, but also between what you're doing internally and doing externally. But an example of what I'm talking about is about taking it out of context is talk about it as if you were remodeling your kitchen or buying a new piece of manufacturing equipment. Not something you necessarily want to skimp out on, or you're going to be unhappy with the outcome. Now, okay, maybe you can do without the really fancy high cost handles on the cabinets in the kitchen, and those can be easily replaced later on, but you don't want to do without a kitchen sink.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you, Kevin. Laura, just to you, I mean, I was a client for a number of years, and it can be quite lonely, you know, and that's where I see an enormous amount of value, an incredible amount of value in the forums that you and the other trade bodies kind of bringing together like-minded professionals in a safe environment to share insights and learnings and network and collaborate is brilliant. But in a moment of crisis, it can be even lonelier, and you batten down the hatches and you focus on the challenges ahead. How do you, as a sourcing forum, enable collaboration, even perhaps when many of your key members are just looking at surviving day by day, dealing with the kind of issues within the organization? How do you kind of raise that up higher and begin to start sharing some of the things like, you know, the principles that Kevin has just spoken about earlier?
It's a really good question, because that's actually the core business of WFA, right? To bring people together and make sure they want to come together and find what I want to say is, it's interesting because I feel with the current pandemic, our sessions have become some sort of therapy sessions as well. So it makes you feel good to see that you're not the only one struggling.
Yeah, that's right.
And it actually, you know, you may not have all the answers, but you may have one answer that you're going to share to someone else who also doesn't have all the answers, but is going to have one answer to you. And then this is how we do. And yeah, it's so to your question, how do we engage people to collaborate? To be honest, I feel with the engagement of our members has increased during the pandemic. Yeah, it's quite amazing. It's actually quite nice as well. We used to have a lot of physical meetings. Now that it's remote, so it's complete different format. You can't spend 8 hours in a remote meeting. That doesn't work like we used to do before. But you have, you know, people are focused. They're gonna share. They're gonna be able to join. You're gonna have people you would sometimes not even have in the room before because they weren't able to travel, get the travel budget approved. So, I mean, personally, I feel the engagement has been amazing. So, and
Laura, brilliant. Laura, do you get a sense of optimism from your kind of procurement sourcing community that you know they will become bigger, stronger, better as we go through this crisis?
Yeah, well, there's a sort of that there is reality, right? So there are some challenges, and they are aware of the current challenges, and obviously depending on the industry, if you're a FMCG producing toilet paper or sanitary hand gel, you've not been affected the same way than an airline or company in a hospitality sector. So your degree of optimism may be a bit different, you know.
Of course.
I would say that everyone is trying to be optimistic and to help, at least in marketing procurement, to help the business find their way back to growth or to maintain the growth they've achieved during the pandemic, or I don't know, even move to the next level of growth. And for instance, you know, increase the amount of services available online, etc. So I think there is a real sense of community and relationships, even amongst competitors. I mean, I don't know if you saw the GSK and I think that was Sanofi. They worked together to find a vaccine together. You know what I mean?
Right, amazing, absolutely right.
So there's really like people trying to, you see a lot like we're in this together, blah, blah, blah. But that is so true. I think there's a real sense of community and people trying to find solutions together.
That's great to hear. I can hear Tom itching to get back on screen to ask a few questions.
I know, it's terrible. Sorry.
We can't shut him up.
I know. I just wanted to jump in and ask a question, just in case you weren't going to touch on it, because Laura, I know you've got an initiative at the WFA, which kind of is addressing some of the things that we've been talking about, and I want you to have the opportunity to kind of share that with us, which is the Project Spring initiative. Can you, for those that aren't members of the WFA, that might want to be, talk us through that. What is Project Spring?
Yeah, and it's very timely because I spent almost the whole week working on it. And we're very close to release that report. It's a 40-page long report on how to evolve the perception and the role of marketing procurement. So this is something that we started about 2 years ago from a very simple survey where we saw that our marketing procurement community felt that their perception could be improved, and they felt that very often it was quite hard for them to be perceived beyond just bringing savings to their organization. So this is something that we've been discussing with our members, and at different conferences as well. And we've tried to identify the elements that would make your perception either good or bad. So that may be in relation to your procurement processes, that may be in relation to the people you're working with and their understanding of what you do, the trainings that you provide, the performance metrics that you're using. Do you share these metrics, or do you use only procurement only metrics that don't resonate with the rest of the business? And then also the way you work with your partners, because you can't evolve your perception if you're not acting in the right way with your agency. So this is the whole Project Spring is a report that is going to consolidate some top tips for marketing procurement community to evolve their perception beyond just bringing cost savings and hopefully being seen as true partners for growth.
Yeah. That's good, and hopefully you can, if you haven't already, you can incorporate Kevin's seven pearls of wisdom within that. Maybe that's an addendum that needs to be quickly added.
They're very, very similar to the ones we have. So it's really good to hear that, Kevin, because we're very much in line.
Good. And when's that coming out, Laura?
Well, I'm having discussions with our comms teams, but next week or the week after. So very, very soon.
Perfect. Good timing. Okay, so this is halfway through the year. It's a really good time to think, because Kevin, I mean, you in your business and many other businesses in those roles, you're obviously thinking ahead about plans for the next year, and your marketer stakeholders are making making decisions now, and they need support of their procurement colleagues to do that. So I had a quick follow-up question for you, Kevin, as well, which was, I love your analogy of, that you fit out of the kitchen, and like, should you use the expensive handles? Could you make do with something a bit more utilitarian, perhaps? When we talk about the agencies, particularly, we often talk about them. Sometimes an unfair criticism of agencies is that they maintain very high overhead, obviously by have these fancy downtown offices, and we, in the pitches we run, we see that we always say that the agencies bring out their best biscuits for the clients, so that's where all the money goes. But at this time, when we just say that there's the largest wholesale zero-based budgeting exercise ever undertaken going on right now in every business, so not just from the client side, but the agencies are doing it themselves. A couple of weeks ago, we had Matt Baxter, who's the global CEO of Initiative, on the show, and we were asking him that. Is a fancy downtown office part of the thing that you buy from an agency? Is that an expectation? I'd just be curious. I don't really want to put you on the spot with your own particular agency, Kevin, and how you manage them. But just do both or either of you think that the procurement community is going to be raising the question of what you pay for in an agency? Now that we work in this virtual way, is that a opportunity to invest in different ways?
Potentially, and I think I've heard this talked about in a couple of different places over the last couple of weeks. If we think about the potential for cost reducing our fee with an agency because they no longer have to have a big fancy Manhattan office, potentially, but I think it's going to take a while for that to settle out. I think things are still so uncertain at this point in time. And, even working with my own peers at the Hershey Company, there is an element of cohesiveness and teamwork that is difficult to replace working from remote locations. So I think in some areas within media and marketing, there is something to be said for, being physically in the same location and working together as a team and bouncing off ideas off of each other and having hallway conversations on your way to the bathroom or the coffee station or whatever, stuff that you really can't replace in a virtual environment. Obviously the meetings and discussions can be had virtually, but there is an element that's missing. And do they have to be, in London, New York City, the big media locations, potentially not, but that's also where the talent happens to reside. And, you know, depending on which agency is up and which agency is down, media professionals they bounce around between agencies. It's a small world, and I think they all benefit from having a pool of resources that they can draw from in a tight job market.
I think, I mean, at the moment, that's a bit of a killer question, I think, for agency CEOs. They're just trying to figure out what their offer looks like in 2021. And that's going to obviously be shaped massively by the demands of the requirements of the marketer as translated then into the kind of procurement scope of work and what you're willing to pay for and not pay for. Maybe you don't want to pay for the biscuits anymore, you know, might be reasonable. Yeah. There may be an entrepreneurialism in the agency world that can make a, you know, better, faster, cheaper agency. Maybe that is the route that we're going. Maybe Sorrel was right all along. That would be a dreadful thought. But
okay, I've got one final question for each of our guests today, if that's okay, Tom, if I'm allowed. Cool. Kevin, firstly to you, I mean, this is something that we kind of talked about earlier on, but what advice would you give to procurement leaders who perhaps don't feel that they've got that level of collaboration, that relationship with their kind of marketing stakeholders yet?
I would say that you need to open up an honest dialogue with those media or marketing leaders and define your role as, rather than a red tape policeman or a policy policeman, that you're really there to help them to deliver the business, and that you want to help fill in the potholes, break down the barriers, get past the roadblocks, and that working with you on the front end of projects or sourcing opportunities or planning for the future, that you can help break down those barriers and allow them to achieve their goals. So you need to have an honest discussion about what the goals are and how you both can work together to achieve those goals. And rather than positioning yourself as somebody who gets in the way of them delivering the business, position yourself as somebody who can help them get there faster and better. And potentially,
I love that answer. Thank you. And it actually, it's a lovely little segue to my final question to Laura. We talked earlier on about changing the narrative internally, both to perhaps CPOs and CFOs, repurposing or repackaging kind of media away from media as a cost, is a saving, is a rebate, to one of media value. How do you do that? How do you do that to finance and procurement kind of C-suite leaders within an organization? What advice do you give to your members?
It's a really good question, and I want to say it's probably more relevant than ever now that, you know, you've got all the marketing and media budgets being challenged, and it's going to be hard for you to have that type of discussion, but I'm convinced it's possible. And I don't have 7 advice like Kevin, I've got 5. So
oh, that's good.
I'll say, number 1, get marketing in the loop, because I don't think it should be just a CPO, CFO discussion. You should really get some support from your CMO or your someone senior enough who is seen as credible to your CPO or CFO. Number 2, it starts with communication. Simple, but, you know, sometimes actually things are not well said. So explain and try to convince that marketing, as you said at the beginning, is an investment. And if your organization sees marketing as a cost, well, they will likely expect you to reduce that cost. But if your organization sees marketing as an investment, it will be easier to convince them that this is an investment that needs to be maximized, right? So nobody wants to cut an investment in growth. Number 3, come with tangible examples, because you may say, oh, marketing is an investment or cost. They probably won't get it. So you need to come with tangible examples of consequences of heavy cost-cutting strategies. I won't mention any company names here, but there have been a few examples in the press over the past 2 years some procurement-led initiatives, which I'm sure can help you build your case to convince them that this is value and not cost cutting. Number 4, tell them to look at the bigger picture. So I actually came across a very good article from the Harvard Business Review, dated from 2008, on how to market in a downturn. And I really encourage you to have a look, because they said in the article it's more important than ever to remember that in a downturn, loyal customers are the primary source of cash flow and organic growth. And it's essential to keep bringing in revenues from these key customers as well as others. So you don't want them to switch to your competitors' product and services. So if you reduce your media spend, you may not stay top of mind of your customers, and they may switch to your competitors' product and services. So I think it's quite easy, and hopefully they will understand. And the number 5, risk management issues. Just mention risk management issues. Blindly cutting agency fees will very likely put your external partners at risk. So I don't know, if your cost reduction is higher than a percentage of their profit margin, for instance, it means that they will lose money working on your account, and this will have an impact on the actual salaries of your agency staff, their benefits, etc. So they may not be able to deliver what you would pay for, because some of them will lose their jobs and they won't have the right capacities. In some countries, you can actually even be liable to suppliers' debt if they go bankrupt. That's the case in France. I don't know in other countries, but being French, that's the case that I do know about. And if your annual spend with a third party goes over a certain percentage, and if they go bankrupt, your company can be liable to their debt as well. This is risk management. If you're a big advertiser as well, I'd like to say good luck with managing your brand reputation issues that you're going to get out of this if you have an agency that is losing their business because of you.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is, if none of these previous reasons apply, well, that's very lucky. But you will have to deal with a very demotivated agency staff working on your accounts, and they won't go the extra mile for your brands. And a well-managed, what I want to say is a well-managed agency is a competitive advantage for your company's growth, and fueling that competitive advantage starts with decent levels of remuneration or compensation.
Absolutely, so well said.
Hopefully 5 tips that will help, change the discussion with CFO and CPO. That's
brilliant, so insightful. You know what, I was really looking forward to this episode anyway. I genuinely was, because we were talking about a topic that, I'm hugely passionate, we are hugely passionate about. And I was particularly looking forward to listening to your respective perspectives coming at it from different points of view. And it has more than lived up to my expectations. So Laura, Kevin, thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you so much for your insights. It's been fascinating listening. And thank you very much for agreeing to come on the show. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Certainly. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And
we cut Laura off there.
Mr. Denford.
Nice about you. I'm back. Sorry, Laura. We did have some comments come through, but I think we're kind of pushed for time. There's some good questions, actually, particularly, and we're talking about procurement, how procurement are approaching things like agencies' gender pay gaps, inclusivity and diversity. It's very interesting. We're actually having conversations separately with WFA, somebody else at WFA, about those kind of things as well. So we might come back to talk about those things specifically. Thank you for the question on those. The one thing I've just, in terms to wrap up, I really enjoyed that as well, actually. It's not often we get guests come so well prepared, frankly, with checklists of things that you should do. So they should just have had the show all to themselves. Did a much better job than we do. So I just want to end on the fact that there are more resources available, as we always mention, about how to position media as a source of growth. It's something that you'll know that David and I have been obsessing about for the last 10 years and the last 5 years doing Media Snack. If you go to idcomms.com/growth, we have a whole bunch of new resources there, and you can download a free 30-page Media for Growth workbook, which is a really fun exercise, set of exercises that you can do with your media teams. Doesn't matter whether you're a CMO, CPO, marketing, media, procurement. It would all apply to you. It's about building a vision for media and an operating model for media that's appropriate for the times. The book will give you a step-by-step guide, help you define that operating model, and it gives you tips and templates and ideas of things that you can do yourselves. So go to idcomms.com/growth and you can get started today. But that is all we have time for. I think we've overrun a little bit today.
Yeah.
Again, really appreciate our guests joining us. But that's your Media Snack Live for this week. We'll see you next time.
Bye for now.